Hello, my name's Ed Poole and I'm a member of the Green Party. I'm currently speaking to Green Party members who have proposed motions for our conference this autumn. And today I'm speaking to Lubna Speitan, who has submitted the motion, Zionism is racism. Hi, Lubna.
Hello, Ed.
Can you tell us how this policy was put together and what that process was like?
I joined the Green Party initially as a speaker to discuss the IHRA definition and the JDA and why both should be rejected. And after having those discussions, um, some asked me for help on the motion, but to do so, you had to be a member of the Green Party. And like many at that point in time, I was signed up to your party when it was a mailing list and wasn't sure what would happen and whether that would evolve, but I thought nonetheless there's work that can be done here, and if I can have some input into that, and at least that's something and a ground in which we have prepared for other parties potentially to follow suit on. So I joined the Green Party. While I was doing that work, not only have I met a lot of brilliant people in there, they had some smashing policies on Palestine already that were passed. It was the first party to acknowledge that Israel is an apartheid state committing genocide. It passed motions in support of full BDS and prescribed the IOF as a terrorist agency, along with to apologize for the Balfour Declaration, to call on the government to apologize for that. So this ultimately laid out already a foundation to build upon. When I asked what its current policies were at the time on Palestine, Israel, did it take a 1-2-state position? It had an outdated policy. I was actually told it was down to the Palestinians to decide, but yet when I read the policy, it ultimately explained that it was down to the Israelis and Palestinians to decide, which I thought was quite ironic and quite an insult when you're talking about an oppressed people having to seek permission from their oppressors for their liberation and just negotiate the terms of their oppression or liberation with your oppressors. I mean, can you imagine, especially in a time like this when we're witnessing a live stream genocide? So, of course, these policies are very much outdated, do not reflect the what is happening now, nor did it really for decades. And this has been a fundamental problem which began here with Balfour Declaration. And since that has been at least acknowledged, as well as what is happening on the ground, that Israel is an apartheid state committing genocide, I thought it's about time that we address that. So as a Palestinian, I spoke to many other Palestinians in the party, outside of the party, most importantly, those in Palestine who are on the ground, those who cannot dare to speak these things openly, because that would be another bullet in its head, in their head. You know, imagine saying and calling for this. People have been massacred and slaughtered and raped and robbed of every right already, and to dare speak, that's it. I mean, that's a death sentence ultimately. So we are here carrying their voices to the same arenas that began this and confronting a legacy of racism, of oppression, bringing it back to basically the belly of the beast where it all began. So that is, in short, how this motion was brought forward. So we as Palestinians drafted this. We had input from Jewish, Muslim, Christian allies from all different backgrounds, and also with legal input. So this is a matter that's also entrenched in law, in international law, Human Rights Acts, Geneva Conventions, and of course the Equality Act, which sets a precedent. And it's using the systems that are supposed to be here to protect people that have been abused by oppressors who act with complete impunity as they carry out their genocide, and the states, and most importantly, the British state, that is actually responsible for this. So it's from here it began and here it must end. And this is why it was so vital that we bring this forward, that it is acknowledged. And we have obviously diagnosed here's the root core of the problem. This is its name. And here with it, we provide a solution.
The motion's not shying away from difficult conversations. Why is it important to state that Zionism is racism?
If you go to a doctor to treat a problem, they have to establish first what is the problem. It has a name, right? This is the problem, and then we can begin the treatment for that. And it's the same here. It's identifying the racist root core of it, which is a settler colonialist ideology. And now we're witnessing its practice. which we have been already for decades. It is apartheid, it is genocide, ecocide, scholasticide. And I mean, you could argue that it's so much worse, which it is. I mean, the UN obviously had a resolution 3379 in 75 that acknowledged that Zionism is a form of racism and discrimination. And although it was repealed to accommodate the Madrid Peace Conference with Israel, that was done as a political strategy. It did not deny the fact that it's suddenly not racism or discrimination. And this is acknowledging it. And this is the importance of naming it. Like every oppressor, they have a name. Every problem has a name. And you have to identify that, what it is, define it, before you can find and address it with a solution. So the big problem that we've had here are the conflations between Judaism and Zionism, the weaponization of anti-Semitism that has prevented many, into scaremongering them into silence from speaking out. And these definitions, for example, like the IHRA and JDA definitions of anti-Semitism, are not there to protect Jewish people from discrimination, but rather to protect a racist state against the criticism it so rightly deserves. So we have cut through with this motion, of course, the conflations that are used to silence people and used as a cudgel to basically deny people from their basic right of freedom of speech and create the conflations which anti-Zionist Jews are really in huge support and wanting something like this because they detest and reject the genocide, the state of Israel, and what it stands for. And they are saying, you know, not in our name. They have created these conflations, which is anti-Semitic, which is against us as Jewish people. And so with their support and input, which has been valuable, we've managed to identify the problem and separate that. So people are clear and certain of the differences between Zionism and anti-Semitism.
The motion specifies a single democratic Palestinian state. Do you think a two-state solution is impossible?
We've witnessed it. You know, we've historically, I mean, like they've built to this. Palestinians said, yes, okay, we'll do anything. We've had the peace talks, the Oslo Accords, put down your weapons, do this, do this. We accept the two-state, just please leave us alone, like do what you want. Has that stopped it? No. They agreed to this two-state. Most recently, you know, they established what they acknowledge as a Palestinian state. And look what's happened. Israel has said verbally and in practice that they will never accept a Palestinian state. And here it is. I mean, some people argue, well, they haven't defined their borders. Like, even if they did, that makes right what they've done. The point is, it is an expansionist project. They have not only now expanded this to the West Bank, but also to Lebanon, to Syria, attacks on Iran. And again, this is a threat to world peace. It doesn't stop there. It's here too, in our systems, in our institutions. The only solution, like, if, you know, I mean, it's very different, and what's happening in Palestine is far worse. But when it came to apartheid South Africa, we didn't accept, oh, here we're going to have a black state South Africa and a white state South Africa. It was one South Africa, one people, equal rights. That's what we're asking, that this land that was stolen from Palestinians, if there is anything just that we're going to do, like to resolve this, is return it to the Palestinians as it once was, Palestine, a state that acknowledged equal rights to everybody, a state where we live side by side, Jews, Christians, Muslims, irrespective of the religion. This is what should be done at the very least. You don't just take something for someone, okay, let's call it someone else, or let's endorse this continuity of apartheid, of segregation, of the denial of Palestinian rights. It has been normalized to such an extent. I think many people have now understood. They do now understand there is a tide changing, and this is why this was so important to address this in the motion. And what has been taken, it should be at the very least returned. There should be reparations. There should be accountability and rehabilitation for those that have done this. I mean, we understand there has been extreme brainwashing and the dehumanization of Palestinians to, you know, the Israelis there who have supported this genocide. It is systemic racism that has been so deeply entrenched and ingrained in our systems and in their state. So we're just merely asking for the wrongs that were committed to be put right and for this to be addressed. They will never undo the pain and the suffering, the torture that the Palestinians have had to endure for decades, but this can be a beginning to the end of this horror show. and also the beginning of, again, reinstating lands that belong to the people, all people who acknowledged equal rights for everyone.
In the West, there's been widespread support for Ukraine resisting Russian occupation. Are you surprised by the very different attitude towards Palestinians and their occupation by Israel?
No, of course not. I mean, that again re reflects the institutional racism, the discrimination, the selective discrimination as well. You know, one when it comes to Palestinians, what is it? Our brown skin, our brown eyes, our brown hair, and like it's the demonization, the dehumanization of others. Again, this is instilled in sort of this um the prejudice against those, like to make acceptable. I mean, no one's talking about, for example, what's happening in Sudan. You know, because their skin is dark, does it mean their lives matter less? These are questions that everybody should be asking themselves. Why is it we have these clear double standards and one set of rules for one group of people and one for another? And this needs to be dismantled, you know, in all our institutions and to be called out and confronted. Is the hypocrisy. There is no democracy, no equality as long as this is permitted to any people, irrespective of the color of their skin, their background, their religion. This should not be accepted, and it's been made acceptable for far too long, and it's become so deeply entrenched. And until we confront that, things will never change. We cannot claim to be anti-racist and still then support and have these clear double standards. And then is beyond that. It's not only have they accepted that and they say, okay, yes, we support an end to what's happening in Ukraine, but not only do they not object to what's happening to Palestinians, they fuel it, they fund it, they are participants in genocide, and they should feel shame. And we should absolutely continue to confront it and dismantle these double standards.
The motion calls for the UK government to impose full embargoes and sanctions on Israel. Why do you think this is important?
Again, it's the institutional, the ties with these countries is what continues to fuel it, to fuel the beast, so to say. And when you again look at the South Africa apartheid example, one of the major components of dismantling that apartheid was by severing those ties, by preventing and ending the funding that fueled it. So, I mean, this motion, what we go as far, you know, as embargoes. I mean, there has to be sanctions politically, economically. And we're not talking about limiting it merely to the UN prescribed list, which is like what, 5%. We're talking about the whole thing. It should not be normalized or accepted or become acceptable to anybody. And to do that, we must stop feeding it. We must stop fueling it. And so this is absolutely vital that people acknowledge that this is something, and I will say it clearly and concisely, that Israel has no legal, moral, or ethical right to exist. People do. And this is the fundamental of what we're doing and saying that no one should be funding, no countries, no states should be funding and fueling apartheid. And this is what they're doing. There is continuation of the status quo, or not even that, it's now continuation of our erasure. It has come to this point. We've seen it's gone beyond apartheid. This has never been, there's been huge failings in systematically. Um, and this is one of the things, one of the main things that we can do to end it is to stop fueling it. You're feeding the problem.
The motion also calls for the release of Palestinian prisoners of conscience and the end to administrative detention and the treatment of Palestinian combatants in accordance with international law. Can you say a bit more about that?
Many Palestinians have been held captive, and there's a difference between that and prisoners. And prisoners would assume they've done something wrong. We're talking about children. The largest globally held children, they hold prisoners or captive in their torture camps. And this is what they are, torture camps. And again, this is legalized. They have now made a new law to make acceptable, like a death penalty. You're having people who are tortured by rape, men who are, they have inserted, like in doctors, metal poles into their rectum and rape them to death with these things. Like, who does this? Electrocution, gang rapes, torture, beating, psychological, like speakers literally blaring in their ears until they're deafened. Then dogs. They have trained dogs. This is documented and evidence. Dogs have been trained to rape Palestinians. This is what we're talking about. It's not even just a matter of putting them in prison, even starvation, denying them of treatment. It's it's the most horrifying thing to think that this is happening. You wouldn't accept it in any prison anyway, like let alone if someone did something wrong or not. But their only crime is what? Being Palestinian. It's an absolute disgrace, and they should all be released. This is, and when they hold it under administrative detention, it means they can just take any Palestinian, deny them the basic rights that people should have of representation. Many families don't even know where they've gone, or they can hold them for indefinite periods of time. And the horrors of what they're enduring, many don't even survive. And in addition to that, I mean, many are killed in there already, irrespective of their new imposed death penalty that attempts to legalize it. But many, if they do manage to continue existing and enduring that horror, the death rates of suicide, the suicide rates are so high. Like these are young men who have been released, and women and children who cannot cope with the mental implications of having had endured this. And one, for example, one of my cousin's friends was released, and he so disturbed. 2 weeks after his release, he went to the top of a building and jumped to his death. These things they don't talk about. And this has been normalized and accepted. The mainstream propaganda doesn't report on these things. Of course, they don't want to hear a Palestinian narrative. Of course, they don't want to hear the truth because they are directly responsible and complicit and participant in our genocide. The same racist propaganda machines that also demonized, the Congolese, the Jews who fought in the Warsaw ghettos, the Irish, the South Africans. Their history is long and bloody. And so at least we have, shows like this and independent media channels that can bring the truth forward, that we can talk, and we must continue. We're living in an age where we have access to these things, even though many of those people, as you know, been shadow banned and the truth has been, denied, like, and censored. It's an absolute disgrace, which is why it's so absolutely important that people are better educated, that we do keep the conversation going. And unless we talk about it and confront it, nothing will change. And it's absolutely horrifying to know that this is what's happening. And young men now in the West Bank are literally being kidnapped, snatched, tortures. Like it's my family are there. And for what's left of them, we have to continue. We have to keep speaking and not continue to permit this and endorse it by funding it, by fueling it, by denying the narrative and denying Palestinian voices and our basic human rights. So yeah, it's so very important. And I mean, we can go into the discussion about resistance here, the way that resistance have been demonized, and these terrorism acts, which I'm strongly in opposition to. It makes a mockery of international law, of a right to all oppressed people to resist their oppressors. And so I oppose the prescriptions of these groups, and I'm happy to talk more about that if you should wish to. But I have discussed this in many other shows that I have done. Again, this is about our rights, all of our rights to oppose oppression and to oppose the land grabs and the dispossession of all oppressed people. And again, this also infringes upon our rights here. So this is a matter that concerns and should concern everybody.
Absolutely. As you touched on, my next question is the motion calls for the prescription in the UK of Palestine action to end, and for people arrested in the UK for supporting Palestinian rights to be released. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you want to say a bit more about why that's so important?
Yeah. I mean, we have people being arrested for opposing injustice, for opposing genocide. And instead of those who are participants in genocide, they are the ones that are walking the streets with complete impunity. And whilst good people who are standing up and protesting and taking non-violent action as a means to oppose a genocidal racist war machine. I mean, when you think about that, it's absolutely ludicrous. The hypocrisy and the corruption. This is again, a matter that very much concerns us all. This is our freedom of speech, our right to protest on the line, rights that, our predecessors before us has fought for so long and made such sacrifices so that we can enjoy those basic human fundamental rights. And now they are on the line with it. So we must support the deep prescription of all of those who resist. And what should happen in a just world is those that commit these crimes should be held to account. And it's the same. This goes into the current case now where we've called for the arrest. There's over 2,000 Britons that are participating in the IOF, the Israeli occupation forces, slaughtering Palestinians. They could be our neighbors, and they walk on our streets, complete impunity, no accountability. What message does that send? And then those of us who oppose it are demonized, are imprisoned, accused of terrorism, when those actually committing those acts of terrorism walk scot-free. This just exposes the systemic racism, this culture of just the impunity. What use are these laws, again, if we're not going to apply them? It's just a mockery of our whole system, and it really turns it out on its head. What is happening in Palestine is a litmus test, and beyond a litmus test, it's a test of compliancy. How compliant will we remain in the face of injustice? And you remember the age of the poem, First They Came for the Communists? Well, this is all of us. They come for the Palestinians and the world does nothing. What do you think is going to come? This is a mirror image of what we're accepting: surveillance state, fascism. This is genocide, erasure of a people, and our fundamental basic human rights on the line. So we must absolutely oppose these prescriptions of whether it's the Palestine Action Group or the resistance back home who are fighting again their oppression. It is a basic fundamental right, and one that should be acknowledged and should be implemented. And what should take place is accountability for those who are committing these crimes. And when you see the institutions failing that and refusing, for example, to investigate, then they too must be held to account. And that will come from the people. The people are now acknowledging and waking up. And this motion, as you've seen, has garnered huge support. It has broken its own record twice over. Never has a motion come to this party that has had so much support. So when others accuse it of being divisive, I think it speaks for itself. This is a matter of basic human rights, and anybody who truly opposes racism and genocide will acknowledge these basic rights. Again, this is not something new. This is something that exists, that has just been simply denied for the Palestinians for so long and normalized. And we are bringing this discussion back. We are confronting it, and with it providing a solution that literally just calls for equal rights. There is nothing contentious or divisive about that. And the fact that it has garnered support both within the party, outside of the party, and I couldn't be more proud of all of those who stand up and continue to stand up as a united front against all forms of discrimination. And that's exactly what this motion does.
On the Green Party, the motion calls for Zionism to be treated as a form of racism internally within the Green Party. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Again, this brings it back home. How can any party claim to be anti-racist and have anti-racist policies if you're not going to acknowledge, this big, that the fundamental issue of our time is a genocide? So this is bringing it back for the party to acknowledge. So we, as a party, when we say we're anti-racist, we truly are. And it sets not just a precedent, but we then become the first party that truly, truly acknowledges and confronts what hasn't been for so long. And in the same arena that it began. So as they say, it begins at home. And this is exactly what we're doing here.
How can members support this motion?
So members, we've got different, as you know, stages in this. We have next coming up the prioritization process. So please do prioritize this. It is a matter of urgency. It is our basic fundamental human rights here. Keep the conversation alive. Keep speaking about it. Work with your other organizations. This is not just a motion that is limited to the Green Party. This is a movement that is basically expanding, not just here, but it's gone from here to Australia. Many other organizations and individuals have spoken up in support of this. And this is where we as people unite now. So please join us, follow us on the social media channels, which is Greens for Palestine. You can also email us on our website, Greens for Palestine UK. There's more information, literature, ways you can join and support us and follow the process. And please turn up at conference and support us there too. Thank you.
Lubna, thanks very much.
Thank you.